On my 28th birthday, surrounded by everyone I loved, I was about to share our happiest news. But my husband, Mark, beat me to it. He handed me a small velvet box, and as I opened it with trembling hands, he announced to our stunned guests that he was leaving me for my best friend. I'd been with Mark for 4 years, married for 2. He was the kind of man who made you feel like the only person in the room, with a smile that could disarm you completely. We built a life in a small downtown apartment that was always filled with laughter and our big shared dreams. He was ambitious, always talking about the tech startup he was going to launch, the house by the lake we'd own someday. I loved that about him, his relentless, infectious optimism. I should have noticed how that ambition sometimes curdled into envy, how he'd get a tightness around his eyes when a friend bought a new car or got a promotion. But love, as they say, is blinding. I was busy building a future, not looking for cracks in the foundation. The nausea started about 2 months before my birthday. I blamed it on stress, on late nights at the graphic design firm where I worked. But when the 3rd pregnancy test showed 2 stark blue lines, my world tilted on its axis. Fear, joy, and sheer terror warred inside me. I told my sister, Chloe, first. She held my hands, her eyes wide, and asked the only question that mattered. What do you want? I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I wanted this baby. And I decided to tell Mark in the most special way I could imagine, surrounded by our family and friends at my birthday party. It felt like perfect poetic timing. I stood frozen, the open box in my hands. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a single brass key, the spare key to our apartment. My mind, slow and thick with shock, couldn't process it. Was this a weird, symbolic promise? A key to our future home? I looked up at Mark, my eyes pleading for an explanation, but his expression was one I'd never seen before. Cold, resolute, almost bored. "I'm done, Sophie," he said, his voice cutting through the music. "I'm in love with Lena. I'm moving out tonight." The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. Lena, my Lena, the one who'd helped me plan this very party. I could feel the weight of every single stare, a physical pressure pushing the air out of my lungs. The pregnancy announcement I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks dissolved on my tongue, tasting like ash. And then I did the one thing nobody expected. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a slow, cold stretching of my lips. Because in that earth-shattering second, I realized something crucial. Mark had just made his grand exit, but he had no idea he was walking off a cliff. He thought he held all the power, but he was handing it to me piece by shattered piece. The smile on my face felt like a foreign object, a mask I had to physically hold in place. Mark's grand confession hung in the air, a toxic cloud that choked the room. I saw the confusion on our friends' faces, the way their celebratory smiles faltered and died. I saw Lena, my best friend since freshman year of college, staring at the floor, her cheeks flushed with a shame she should have felt far earlier. Mark waited, I think, for me to scream, to cry, to crumble into the pathetic mess he clearly believed I was. But I just closed the lid of the velvet box with a soft, definitive click. The sound was deafening in the silence. "Thank you for the birthday gift, Mark," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "It's certainly memorable." I turned my back on him, a deliberate act of dismissal, and walked to the kitchen counter. I picked up the cake knife, the one meant to slice into the chocolate fudge masterpiece we'd chosen together. My hands didn't shake. I felt a surreal, icy clarity wash over me. He thought this was the end of my story. He didn't know it was the brutal, bloody beginning. He didn't know about the life growing inside me, a secret I'd been cradling for weeks. And he certainly didn't know about the file on my laptop, the one labeled House Ideas, where I'd accidentally stumbled upon a folder of his secret bank statements and love letters to Lena 2 weeks prior, a discovery that had made my blood run so cold I thought I'd never feel warm again. I began cutting the cake. The knife slid through the rich layers with a smooth, satisfying sound. "Who wants the first slice?" I asked the room, my voice a bizarrely cheerful counterpoint to the devastation. My sister, Chloe, was the first to move, her expression a storm of fury and concern. She came to my side, her presence a silent anchor. "I'll help you serve, Soph," she said, her voice tight. She took the knife from my hand, her own trembling slightly, and started plating slices. boxes, forcing them into the hands of our stunned guests. It was a surreal funeral procession. People accepted the cake out of sheer, bewildered reflex. Mark was still standing there, looking lost, his grand exit now feeling awkward and unfinished. Lena had slipped out the front door, the coward. "You should probably go with her," I said to Mark without looking at him, focusing on wiping a smudge of frosting from the counter. "I believe your stuff is already packed. I had a feeling tonight would be eventful." That was a lie. The packed boxes in the hall closet were for donations, old clothes I'd been meaning to get rid of. But the flicker of shock and confusion on his face was worth it. He finally left, the door clicking shut behind him, with a sound that felt both an ending and a beginning. The moment he was gone, the fragile silence shattered. Everyone started talking at once, voices overlapping in a chorus of "I can't believe it" and "Are you okay?" I held up a hand. "Thank you, everyone, for coming to my birthday," I said, my calm finally starting to crack at the edges. I think I need to be alone now." As they filed out, offering hugs and shell-shocked looks, Chloe stayed, her arm around my waist, holding me together. When the last guest was gone, I finally let the mask fall. I didn't cry. I shook. A full-body, bone-rattling tremor of pure, undiluted rage. Once the shaking subsided, a cold, hard focus took its place. Chloe made tea, the clinking of mugs a familiar sound in the sudden silence of the apartment. "How long have you known?" she asked softly. I told her everything. The nausea I'd mistaken for stress, the blue lines on the test, my plan for the perfect announcement, and then the other discovery, the one that had stolen my breath before the pregnancy could. 2 weeks ago, I whispered. I was looking for our marriage certificate to get a passport renewal. I found a hidden folder on his cloud drive. I opened my laptop, my fingers steady now, and showed her. Spreadsheets of secret credit card debt, hotel receipts from weekends he'd claimed were work retreats, and emails. Long, passionate emails to Lena, describing a future together, mocking my naive dreams, and detailing how he planned to leave me after he'd secured a few more clients from my professional network. Chloe read them, her face pale with fury. "He was using you," she breathed. "He was waiting until he'd milked your contacts dry." I nodded, a bitter taste in my mouth. "He didn't know I knew, and he has no idea about this," I said, placing a hand on my stomach. "That changes everything, Self," Chloe said, her eyes wide. "You have to tell him." I looked at the closed door, the space where he'd stood so arrogantly. "No," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "Not yet. He wanted a clean break, he'll get one. But he doesn't get to control the narrative anymore. I need to be smart now. For me, for this baby. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was a strategist, and the battlefield was my own life." The next morning, I woke up to the scent of coffee and the sound of Chloe on the phone, her voice a low, fierce murmur. Yes, a locksmith, today, ASAP. She'd already changed the Wi-Fi password and was systematically logging out of all shared streaming accounts on the smart TV. It was a quiet, methodical dismantling of a shared life. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts from concerned friends, a few from mutual acquaintances fishing for gossip, and a single terse message from Mark. "I'll be by at 7 to get the rest of my things. Don't be there." The audacity was breathtaking. I stared at the screen, my morning sickness churning in my stomach. Last night he'd publicly eviscerated me, and now he was giving me orders? I typed back a single cold word. "No." His response was immediate, a ringing call that I sent straight to voicemail. Chloe raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. He's realizing his grand exit didn't come with a user manual." I almost smiled. By 6:30 p.m., my small apartment was a fortress. Chloe had called in reinforcements. Our cousin David, a quietly imposing gym owner, and his partner Marcus. They didn't ask questions, just stood as a wall of silent, supportive muscle. When Mark arrived at 7 p.m. on the dot, his key useless in the new lock, his confident smirk died when David opened the door. "She said you could have one box," David stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. He handed Mark a single cardboard box filled with random, unimportant items from the back of his closet. Mark tried to peer around him. "Sophie, this is ridiculous. These aren't even my things." I walked to the doorway, standing safely behind David. "It's a start," I said, my voice calm. "We can discuss the rest when you demonstrate some basic human decency. Until then, you get what I give you." The look of sheer, impotent frustration on his face was a balm to my soul. He took the box and left, muttering about me being unreasonable. The irony was so thick you could taste it. The following week was a blur of necessary, soul-numbing tasks. I officially confirmed the pregnancy at the doctor's office. 8 weeks along, a tiny flickering heartbeat on the screen that made everything feel terrifyingly real. I met with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Vance, who laid out the cold, hard facts of my situation. I froze our joint account, moving my earnings into a new, private one. With every signature on every form, I felt a layer of my old self, the one who trusted and built dreams with Mark, slough away. I didn't tell him about the baby. My silence was now a weapon, and I was learning how to wield it. The confirmation of his affair with Lena came from an unexpected source. Marcus, who worked in the same tech hub as Mark, sent me a discreet text. Saw Mark and Lena at the Oak Room. Looked very cozy. Thought you should know. The Oak Room. That was the expensive restaurant Mark had taken me to for our anniversary, claiming he'd saved for months. I felt a fresh wave of nausea, but this time it wasn't from the pregnancy. It was from the sheer, calculated duplicity. A few days later, Mark texted, asking to talk like adults and get his real belongings. I agreed, on my terms. A public park bench in broad daylight. He looked haggard, his usual polished appearance frayed. He launched into a rehearsed speech about growing apart and needing more. I let him talk, watching a sparrow hop across the path until I finally cut him off. How's Lena enjoying the apartment you can't afford without my half of the rent? The color drained from his face. He stammered, what are you talking about? I listed the secret credit card bills, the hotel charges, the dates that matched his business trips. I watched the realization dawn in his eyes. I hadn't been the clueless wife he thought I was. He had been the one in the dark. This meeting is over, I said, standing up. Your things will be packed and available for pickup Saturday. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the formal separation. I walked away, leaving him gaping on the bench, the master of his own ruined universe. True to my word, I had all of Mark's belongings packed into boxes and placed in the building's storage unit. The pickup was supervised by David. I spent that day at a prenatal yoga class, focusing on my breath and the new life inside me, physically distancing myself from that chapter. Reclaiming the apartment was my next mission. I rearranged furniture, donated our garish abstract painting he loved, and painted the walls a soft, calming lavender. It was no longer our place. It was mine, and soon it would be my child's sanctuary. Weeks turned into a new quiet rhythm. Work, doctor's appointments, and quiet evenings with Chloe. The gossip died down, and my world, though smaller, felt more authentic. I heard through the grapevine that things with Lena were already rocky. The fantasy couldn't survive the reality of Mark's debt and his bruised ego. He texted me once, a rambling message about mistakes and regret. I didn't respond. My silence was my final word. My first ultrasound, the one where I found out I was having a girl, was the day I truly felt free. I was building a future, not on the ashes of a broken dream, but on a foundation I was laying myself, brick by steady brick. On what would have been our 3rd anniversary, a courier delivered a small package to my door. No return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single silver rattle. There was no note. It was an apology, a plea, and an acknowledgement, all in one. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight. Then I placed it in the drawer of the nursery dresser I had assembled myself. It was a part of her story, but it wouldn't define it. I placed my hands on my now swollen belly, feeling my daughter kick. A little flutter of limitless possibility. He had given me a box of endings, but she was my beginning.